Thanks, Yelena. Hi, everybody. As Yelena mentioned, my name is Tabitha Schmaltz. I am one of the senior technology consultants here at Dean Dorton, and we are going to be covering custom fields and dimensions in Sage Intacct. If you have any specific thoughts about how this could be used with your organization, I encourage you to jot them down now and ask any questions during our question and answer sections. We can go ahead and cover those for you. Right. At the end of this session, we have a few objectives that we're hoping that you'll feel that we've met. The first is that you're going to understand why we use custom fields and dimensions and what benefits those could bring to your organization. We're going to walk through how we added those custom fields to not only to the dimensions, but we can actually add them to many fields inside of Sage Intacct. We're also going to be covering how to create additional tabs inside of our dimensions that will help us to provide more information and to help segregate the fields into meaningful organized units. And then we're going to be producing some financial reports that will actually utilize all of that work that we did. Now, for sake of time sensitivity and making sure we have enough time to answer questions, we're not going to go really in depth into the technical knowledge behind some of these pieces. But if it is a piece that you think will be beneficial to you or your organization, we can go ahead and schedule some one-on-one time for that as well. So for purposes of this demo and this discussion, we're actually going to put it into relatable terms because I feel like a lot of these ideas transfer a lot better when you understand the business case behind it. So we're going to talk about Arendelle Ice. Arendelle Ice is a fictional company that we've created. But it may have some very real circumstances that you can relate to, or maybe your clients can relate to if you're working with additional clients as well. So Arendelle Ice that we've created is a fictitious American Hockey League franchise. They have a nice arena, and they're actually looking for a new sponsor. So as part of that process in finding a new sponsor for their arena, they needed to start making some changes to be able to provide better financials and better information to their investors. So they recently made the change over to Sage Intacct, and when they made that change, a focus that they were having was on reporting. So one of the big things that they really wanted to be able to do was to be able to run reports showing profits or losses by event type, by division, by opponent that they were playing, etc. And they kept coming up with all kinds of ways that they needed to slice and dice their data in order to be able to provide those meaningful reports. All right. So they decided to make this change to Intacct, but there was a few things that when they said we needed to look at those reports that we had to take into consideration. So the first thing that we had to take into consideration was that they had very simple accounting. So sometimes we have a need for very extensive reports, but the accounting that we're doing is very simple. We have a simple chart of accounts. We have a simple matrix that we're wanting to keep track of as far as our dimension values, but we're not really sure what else we want to do. Because the last thing we really want to do is complicate things. So we also had a need to keep a very simple 4-digit chart of accounts. We don't want to create sub-accounts for every type of revenue or every opponent. We want to be able to quickly look at a dimension and be able to see as much detail as we can. We want it to be easy to track, easy for us to be able to use. So when we look at all of these types of needs, the solution becomes really apparent, especially when we utilize Intacct. The first is using dimensions. Now, most of you are familiar with dimensions and what those look like inside of Intacct. And if you haven't quite made the change over to Intacct, you may be familiar with the use of something like class inside of QuickBooks. So utilizing the dimension is a way to tag your data to be able to bring additional functionality into the system. The other part of the solution that we really wanted to explore here, though, for Arendelle Ice was the use of custom fields. So custom fields is going to be a way that we're going to basically expand out those dimensions. So when we talk about the dimensions versus custom fields, there's two ways that we can look at this. Okay, so the dimension is something that is provided through Intacct. We have more than 10 dimensions in the standard product that are available for use, and then there's a bit availability for additional custom dimensions. We are able to tag every single transaction in the system to those dimensions. So whether we're entering a journal entry, an AP bill, a receipt, we're able to tag them with our dimensions. Then we also have the ability to adjust the terminology inside of the system to allow your industry or your organization to understand or to recognize the words that are being used. So simple changes might be switching from the word customer to client or source of revenue, changing from department. You might change department to cost segment. So we have the ability to change that terminology for you to match your industry. It's also a great way to silo our data. So this helps us to be able to segment the data better, create better reporting, and be able to track it in more ways. The second part is the custom fields. So custom fields are also available in our standard product. There is no add-on fee. We don't have to add on any new subscriptions. It is something that is available inside of the standard product. We also can add this to many windows in the system, whether we are wanting to add this onto the custom field piece onto the header for a bill or a journal entry. We can add additional fields into those windows. Now, the custom field also lets us create a way that we can capture information that we normally would not be able to capture with the way a dimension is set up. And what I mean by this is, let's say we are creating a new class. Most of you have done this, just looking at the list of attendees here. Most of you have created a dimension before, and you understand that most of the times we just create an ID and we create a name. And that combination there, that relationship, provides some information, but usually not a lot. So custom fields allows us to be able to capture checkboxes, dates, text fields, add a bunch more information into the system that is more than what the ID and name relationship can normally house. So there's two types of custom fields that we can actually add into the system. The first is a dimensional custom field, and the second is a transactional custom field. Okay, so a dimensional custom field is something that provides an attribute to the dimension itself. We're going to actually look at these in our live system, so hopefully that will help make this a little bit more tangible for you. And what it does by creating these custom fields is it's what brings the data to life. So we give the dimension a name and an ID, and then we say, tell me more about the dimension. Tell me a date that this became active. Tell me a description of how this is being used. Tell me as much information as we possibly can, and it allows us to give all the details related to that activity, that transaction, etc. The other option we have is a transactional custom field. So the transactional custom fields are the ones that we would put onto the header or the record level of the transaction. So when I mentioned putting a custom field onto like an AP bill, for example, that is going to be happening on the transaction. We would be entering that information on the AP bill as opposed to inside of the dimension, which is being populated later. This is a way that we can tag the data. It's just adding the information onto the actual transaction that is happening inside of the system, and it is not tied specifically to any dimension. It's just more in general. As I mentioned before, Intacct also allows us the flexibility to change the terminology. This was really important for Arundel ICE because what we decided we were going to do at this point was take something that was a little unfamiliar, like the word class, and make it really familiar. So for Arundel, this became changing the term class or classes into event or events. So Arundel specifically wanted to be able to track the types of events that were happening, who was attending, who their market was, what the dates of those events, etc. And so we decided, let's go ahead and reterm our class into events and be able to make this more relatable. So renaming these terms is a very simple process. You'd be able to do this in your setup menu, and we'll go ahead and look at that in the live environment as well so that we are able to do that. So once we retermed classes to events, it was time that we started making the customizations. So in order to do that, we do have to utilize platform services, and then we went into custom fields. So we were able to create the custom fields. This allows us to create all of our tabs, our events, and be able to start giving those details. Now, I know it's kind of hard to show this in a screenshot, so we're going to go ahead and jump into that live demo so I can show you what that looks like. All right. So this is Arendelle Ice. We're just inside of Intacct here. And what we did, first of all, let's go ahead and go from our company here, and I'm going to go down to terminology. Now, if any of these screens are not items that you are able to see when you log into your Intacct instance, it may be a permissions issue. If you may not have permissions to adjust anything, so check with your admin, or you can always check back with the support team at Dean Dorton to see if we can assist you. So under settings and terminology, you can see here that we took class and we changed it to or events. Okay, this is something that you can change for any of the dimensions that are in the system. So you can go ahead and make those adjustments. If, for example, you wanted to change customer to client, let me just show you how easy that is. We would just change this to client. And everywhere in the system where the word customer was used before, it will now appear as client or clients. I will tell you, however, just a little side note that on terminology, if we have changed any terms, like from class to event, on import, the import template will still say class. It will not say event, so just keep that in mind. Okay. So then we came into platform services and we created our custom fields. So I'm going to just come here to the words custom fields. And you can see that we added a bunch of information in here. Now, if you're someone who's not very technical, some of this might look like it's a little bit difficult to understand. So let's take a look at how this actually affected our class breakout. So I'm going to go here to reports and then to my dimensions, and I'm going to select events. And here you're able to see a list of different events that were happening at Arendelle. So we have these, we have an automatic ID that we are using. So the way that we did, the way that we had been naming events as they occurred was first listing what type of event they were, if they were concerts, family events, hockey games, etc., and then the date that that event was taking place. The name is simply the more common terms that would allow us to understand what the event was. So Carrie Underwood concert, Disney on Ice, etc. Let's go ahead and jump into one of these. All right. So here under Arendelle Ice, we have an event. It looks like this event was happening on 2/22 of last year. So this is a Carrie Underwood concert. Normally in a typical class dimension, we would just have this first box here, this whole top section. And so we'd be able to identify the event, description, a parent or child ID, and then the class, or whether the class is active or inactive. By utilizing custom fields, we were able to add additional information. So the first is the event details. So we wanted to know what type of event what that was. So we can say this was a concert, if it was a family show, if it was something else, or if it was a sports type event. So we selected that this is a concert, and this is the event date that it happened. If it happened to have a trip number associated with it, we could add that additional information here. This is just an alphanumeric text field. So this shows you that we have the ability to add a pick list, a date, and just do alphanumeric for those custom fields. Across the top, you can see we also created additional tabs. So if I come through the tabs, I can show you some of the options that we had available. The first is if we designated that this was a sport event, we wanted to be able to identify whether it was a hockey event, a basketball event, or just a general sports event. So like volleyball, we can identify the type of sports that we were having at the time. If it was a hockey, if we were doing a hockey game, we wanted to identify our opponent and whether it was a playoff game. Sometimes we want to know if those playoff games are generating additional sales or what is our most profitable opponent. And then we could see also what season it was that game took place. We could do the same thing here for basketball as well. We were able to identify concerts. So in this case, we did say it was a country music concert, although we could have identified a different genre as well as the type of artist that was attending. So we'd be able to identify, are our solo artists really generating the dollars that they said that they would? Are we getting more profits when we have a group involved? So we can make decisions based on the artist type as well. Maybe we have a family label, so maybe it's an on-ice show or a stage show, and we can keep track of the labels that are also utilizing the venue. Okay, and these were actually just ones that I created for Intacct at the time. So the point being is that originally our class dimension was limited to just this simple box. And now we're able to really cram a bunch of information in there and really stretch the dimension a lot further. Now, you might be wondering, well, why would I do that? Why would I go and stretch this much information into this event? And the reason is so that we can go and create reports that give us additional information. Okay. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go to my general ledger, and I'm going to go to my financial report. So we actually have the ability to run all of our standard reports like we would do before, but there's sometimes that we want to see maybe a P&L by type of event. So I'm going to actually, let's just go ahead and run this one so I can show you. So this event, we actually said, just go ahead and show us all types of events, and we want to know whether we're producing a good, acceptable net income for family events, concerts, sports, etc., and we're able to segment the data that way. Now, we also have the ability, I'm going to go ahead and open this up. If you're not familiar with the financial report writer, this is also some additional training that we can do as well. But the important thing to notice here is that we are able to expand our reporting by dimension structures. And so we've created some dimension structures that tell us, if we want to look at all types of events, or maybe we want to look at just concerts, for example. So if I said I want to look at concerts, I'm going to go ahead and preview this one. I could see whether country concerts, pop, rock, etc., were generating acceptable income. So if I look at these, I could see that we actually have been losing money with pop and rock concerts, and we could do some additional research or diagnostics to figure out why we lose money on these types of concerts. Maybe it's the marketing, maybe there's something going on in the world at that time, maybe it was the headliners. So we could go and figure out, do we want to run these type of events in the future? Okay, so we have the ability to segment the data into these additional buckets. Okay, now you're not just limited to a P&L, we can actually create all kinds of reports. So we have, expanded out all of our P&Ls. We can still do them against a budget. So if we have budgets, we can still pull those into these types of reports. We've actually created these as standards for each of the types of events, but you can go and create any of your reporting, and you can segment them by any of your dimensions utilizing these custom fields. But in order to do that, you will create dimension structures, and the dimension structures and dimension groups will be dependent on some logic that you're putting in behind the scenes. So we're not going to dig too far into this, but just understand that although you cannot filter directly by those custom fields that you are creating, what you are able to do is create a structure that follows rules and looks. This is actually a combined conference one, but you can actually create a structure that looks at different groups, and the groups can be created based on logic that looks specifically at those custom fields. Okay. Let me see if I have one in here that edit. So this is groups of classes where we have, we keep combining them and we've done nesting, but you do want to use dimension structures for those. Okay. We'll go ahead and, oops, wrong one. I apologize. There we go. All right. So what this actually does for us is allows us the capability to produce those financial statements that are able to answer those harder questions. So as Arendelle was looking for additional potential investors, they're looking at their current investors and their owners, they're able to determine what is actually making money, what is not making money. So they had questions like, how much does it cost for us to change out the floor when we move from a hockey event to a basketball event? Or maybe we're changing from a basketball event over to a dirt track motor race. Or then we have that dirt track motor race set up and we want to switch back to a country music concert stage. So all of those transactions, how much is it actually costing us to do those things? Are we making more money when we have hockey opponents that are closer to us geographically, or is it more when we have the well-known opponents? Is hockey more profitable than basketball? Should we renegotiate contracts with the local university? What about those divas that come in and, they are rock stars, but they want to have these really lucrative contracts? Can we negotiate better deals now? Because we know exactly what our profitability is when they come to town. So we're able to make those determinations, and that's really helpful. So we actually showed the P&L already, but if you are familiar with creating a report inside of Intacct, so there's a few ways that you're going to work through this. You're going to take your general ledger accounts and you're going to create account categories to group into your reporting. You're going to take your account categories and turn those into account groups. So you're going to segment everything together. And then your dimensions are going to be related to your dimension groups and your dimension groups to dimension structures. And I know that that's a little bit high level on how reports are created. If you do want to build additional reports on custom fields, I'm happy to walk you through those. But the idea here is, again, to walk yourself through the steps, creating the account groups ultimately and your dimension groups or dimension structures ultimately that will combine into your financial report. Okay, so we actually already looked at that, so I'm going to skip that part of the demo. But if I wanted to leave some time here at the end for the questions.
Yeah,
Yelena,
that was great. I don't see any either. We'll let them come in if anybody has a question. And then if you just want to skip to the next slide, if those come in, I just wanted to share something. As always, guys, we like to remind you, if you have any questions, comments, just email erpsupport@ddaftech.com. Just make sure you have that address because that's our correct one. And then some upcoming Cloudbytes in the next few months, smart rules and smart events has been a pretty good topic. We get questions on those. Release 2 is coming up this summer, and then we'll be doing user-defined books. So a lot of good stuff coming up. And as always, if you have any ideas, suggestions about topics that you'd like to review, let us know, and we can definitely try and make a webinar session out of one. But I don't see any questions, Tabitha. So if you guys think of anything, reach out to us, and we will send out this recording and slide deck. So, all right. Well, thanks, everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thanks, Tabitha, and everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.